Terrarian in the Dungeon, Chapter 74, Fan Fiction, by Azazyel. Please like and subscribe to this YouTube channel for listening and patreon.com/Azazyel to read all of his stories. Hestia, on the other hand, frowned as she heard I still had plans to do other crazy things and fight more bosses that would inevitably do their best to kill me and, by extension, her Belle. Can't you spend a couple of days upgrading your gear or something? She asked awkwardly and honestly. I could. The killing of the Eater of Worlds had given me the mental schematics for making the Goblin Tinker's workbench, which would allow me to reforge to make weapons have better modifiers for being a mediocre craftsman, while also allowing to combine more accessories together. But I shook my head, as although Hestia's idea would allow us to gain a bit more power. But with my meteor armor, even with the Calamity mod installed, I had one of, if not the best, defensive armors in the game of Terraria while still being in pre-hard mode. And any weapons I could spend literal weeks grinding to make imperfect, wouldn't matter worth a damn as once I got materials from Freya's adventurers that went to the dragon base for me in the dungeon once they got back with the materials, I could make hell-themed weapons and armor. No Hestia, as I said, I still have 2 last bosses to kill to get some more materials, and then I can take a break to digest all my gains. If it goes well, we could get this all done today after we run outside of Rio to deal with this. I said to persuade her, and the goddess of the hearth frowned as she knew she was right in these battles, not taking long, and that she was stalling us from just getting it over with. Finally, Hestia sighed, and while ruefully smiling, she poked my chest with her finger. You all be careful then, she said as she looked between me and Belle before she focused on Filvis. And I am counting on you, Filvis, to make sure Jake doesn't do anything too stupid. Belle is unlucky and gets dragged into nonsense, but it seems Jake just dives face first into trouble, Hestia said, stabbing my meteor armor-covered chest. And just ignored the heat coming off from the armor as she was a goddess of the hearth, and laughed at such a thing. All right, Hestia, I said dryly as I flicked her head, making her yelp. We are going now. If we are lucky, the whole earthquake in the dungeon will keep the guild scouts from bugging us too much when we leave Rio, I said as I grabbed Belle and began pulling her along with me, as Filvis joined behind me at a quick pace, as I sought to avoid Hestia's smothering gaze. So, having escaped Hestia's bugging, we quickly made our way across Rio, and rather than dealing with the guild and by extension Aurario's obsession in keeping adventurers within the city due to the damage we can cause as we wander the world, we instead used our grappling hooks to simply zip over the massive wall of Rio that was partially built by the gods' hands, like the Tower of Babel was. If Evelys had these grappling hooks, they would be far more of an issue, Filvis muttered after I set her down on the ground while keeping from saying anything, as that was a sensitive topic. Alright, so here is how this is going to go. We are going to fight a massive flying brain that will use illusions, and like the Eye boss did, it will summon a lot of smaller minion versions of itself. But rather than the Eye boss, we need to focus on those miniature versions of it, as those mini versions are what fuels the powerful illusions that will allow it to phase through our attacks and whatnot, I explained. While I was still talking, I also activated my darkened heart to summon the mini-eater of worlds and fueled them up with my mana to make them grow to the sizes of decent-sized houses so we could use them as platforms to jump and grapple onto, while also mentally activating all my other accessories effects to strengthen myself. I am resistant to illusions. Filvis spoke while Belle nodded, and I remembered how her bullshit, I love/simp over you so much that other people's mind control doesn't work on my love/obsession over you skill worked. Well, I am not, so be careful if I start hallucinating, I said, frowning as my Terrarian skill protected me from charming and other damage-based debuffs, but it seemed that I was still game to Terraria debuffs. Sure, in Terraria, the brain of Cthulhu would only make you hallucinate and see other versions of the boss itself, but God knows if that was the case here. The worst thing about Fargo's upgrades to the bosses was that all the bosses had crazy debuffs that only the special accessory item you get after killing the boss like the oscillating eye from the Eye of Cthulhu or the darkened ear from the Eater of Worlds will protect me from the debuffs those bosses could give us. Honestly, the Eye of Cthulhu's Berserker debuff that would drive people and whatever it hits into insanity might have been why the dungeon spawned the Juggernaut as it was so pissed at the Terraria monsters beyond the apparent divinity use. I then took out the large brain that would summon the brain of Cthulhu, and even more so than the summoning of the Eye of Cthulhu, the girls cringed at the sight of it. One of you poke the brain. I want to see if you girls can summon a boss or if only I can do it, I said seriously, and the girls looked at me like I asked them to eat slugs. No, Filvis said bluntly. If you make me touch that, I will not hug or kiss you ever again, Jake, Belle said fiercely as she hid behind Filvis shamelessly, making me slouch in defeat. I need to try to meet Welf and become bros with him. Or hell, just hang out with Gareth as he is pretty chill and relaxed. I thought despondently as I shook my head and cleared my head as I handed out some potions of iron to increase our defense for the next 6 hours. Alright, so be careful of the illusions. I warned them one final time as I poked my finger into the gooey flesh of the brain of Cthulhu summon, and at the sounds of the wet flesh pushing aside from my finger, I could see the girls shuddering in disgust, just affirming my desire for bros that won't squick out, as some of the future bosses will be completely nasty in all senses of the word. The brain of Cthulhu did not spawn with a shriek of fury nor with a glorious cry of battle. No, as it spawned in, I saw that it was already in its second phase, with its purple fleshy brain matter pulled inwards in the middle to expose the eyes and purple gem that made up its core. Terrarian. A voice whispered into my mind, and my vision went black as the brain of Cthulhu split into dozens of copies that each shot magical blasts and created large lances of solid blood from the ground that pushed Bell and Philvis away from me.